today's theme is collecting, stories about the art and passion and craft of collecting, assembling the world, we call it. Because in the time we've spent thinking about collecting, I don't collect anything. In fact, I actively divest everything that I have. But I'm fascinated by collectors because what I've realized is that it's a way of making sense of the world. It's a way of preserving history. It's a way of honoring things that other people may not honor and could be lost to the dustbin of time. And so we have stories today that are about various iterations of collecting, and we're so glad to share them with you. Our first storyteller, his name is John Toft, and he's from here in Baltimore. Hang on, I'm going to introduce you. Sit back down for a minute. John Toft is a flooring installer by day. And by night and by weekend, he does extraordinary things. He decorates cakes. He's got a passion for decorating wedding cakes and birthday cakes. But even more interesting is what he's going to be talking about today, which involves digging with a tool that he's brought to show you. And I'm going to introduce him by saying that he has dug under this building that we are sitting in right now. So please welcome John Toft.
I said my passion is collecting bottles. And a lot of people wonder, they think, what kind of bottles? Well, most of the bottles I collect are pre-1900, and they have historical significance, and they're actually a great thing to collect. I put some bottles out after the proceedings today. If you want to come up and take a look at them at the end of our show today, be more than welcome. I'll answer any questions. There's lots of ways you can collect bottles. You can go on eBay. There's auctions. There's also a bottle club in Baltimore. There's clubs all over the country. Actually, in Baltimore, they have the single biggest bottle show in the country, which is next weekend. There's lots of ways to go out and acquire them. You can dig. You can dig in the woods, farm dumps. The particular way that I acquire my bottles, which is why I'm here today, is I'm a privy digger. How many of you here know what a privy is? Everybody knows? Okay. If you don't know what a privy is an outhouse. Okay, back in the day, before houses had indoor plumbing, every single home had an outhouse. Okay, you fast forward 100 years, and that's where I come in. People say, well, how do you find a privy? Well, there's certain times we go knocking on doors. We'll find a neighborhood, and you can tell by the architecture of the house how old a house is. And we'll knock on the door, and we'll explain what we do. A lot of times they kind of look at you funny and say, what? There is no outhouse or privy in my backyard. I said, au contraire, yes, there is a privy out there. And that's where my friend comes in. This is what we call a probe. This is a bottle digger's best friend. I call him Pete. It's Pete the Probe. What he helps me do is he helps me find the privy, or he helps me find the poop. Now, what we do is a privy is usually located in the same spot in the back of the house. It's usually on the opposite side of the sidewalk where the door is. Why is that? They didn't want the privy to block the sidewalk to the alley, so it's always on the other side of the yard and as far away from the house as you could get it, and as you can imagine why. And what I would do with this, okay, the little shack that you would call an outhouse is, of course, no longer there. It's just a yard like you see here. I would take this and stick it in the ground. It's called a probe, and that's what we do. We probe it in the dirt, and you can hear certain sounds. You can when you pull it out, you look at the end, and you can see different colors of dirt. It could be darker, which you can imagine, and not natural like clay. You could hear the crunch of glass, and yes, one or two times I've put it through an actual bottle. But you find a privy. The privy could be many different structures. It could be lined with brick, where they would dig a big hole and they would line it with brick without mortar, just like a modern cistern today. Or it could be lined with wood. It could be a square box with boards made out of a box, maybe 6-8 feet deep. Or what they normally did is they would take barrels. Back before the turn of the century, a lot of things were shipped in large, what they call hogshead barrels, maybe 4 or 5 foot high. And they would dig a hole and put this barrel in the ground, stick a little structure over top of it, and that was your outhouse. I've seen them where they stacked 2 barrels and they put them in the ground. The deepest privy that I had dug probably would be maybe 30, 35 feet. And most of those were in Philadelphia. In Baltimore, the average one would go 10 or 12 feet. Now, yes, it's a very dangerous hobby. I've never known one to cave in, but the potential is always there. I have seen guys have maybe rocks accidentally dropped on their head, small rocks. Nobody's ever been hurt, but it is really dangerous. It isn't something you might not want to go out and just say, hey, I'm going to buy me a probe and I'm going to go dig some bottles. No, it's not quite that easy. Normally what happens is if you ever wanted to get into it, you kind of befriend a more experienced digger and they kind of show you the ropes and teach you how to go about it. Bottles, a lot of people do it just for the value. I don't do it so much for the value. I've been doing it since I was 12 years old, and it's a real passion of mine. But a lot of value can come into play with a lot of collectors. You can start collecting bottles for a couple dollars a piece. You know, soda bottles from the 30s, and they can range a couple dollars all the way up to the highest price paid for a bottle, which is about $180,000. That's not quite my level of interest. The most I've ever paid for a bottle was $1,000, which the gentleman that I bought it from let me pay it over a time, a sort of layaway program. The most expensive bottle I dug, probably $4,000. Also, people would ask me, what is the most memorable dig you ever been on? And the funny thing is, the most memorable dig I ever can remember was one that I wasn't on. The guys that are the group, a couple of guys that I dig with, they happened to be digging one day, and they dug a stoneware pitcher, if any of you know what stoneware is, and they sold it for $60,000, and I happened to not be there that day. That is the most memorable dig that I can remember that I wasn't on. The most memorable dig, I dug a $3,000 bottle, which was a great day. But you could dig 10 privies and not find anything. But then the one day that you do dig, you can find something and you can do quite well. As I said, I don't dig for the value. I really dig for the history and for the collecting. That's why we're here today, for collecting. Yes. Okay, that's a good question. Whoa. You almost gave a bottle collector a heart attack, but thank you for coming. Glad you could make it. Well, a lot of times, like beer bottles, which I have a beer bottle, or the husband, or a whiskey bottle, the husband will go into the privy, and he might not want his wife to know he's drinking, so he'll run in there, take a little, and then finish, and then throw the evidence down in the privy. Or medicine bottles. A lot of the medicine bottles we find still have a little bit of contents, and just like today, like back then, they want to get rid of it, and so they'll toss it down. Also, the medicines say 1880s, the medicine most of the time had substances in it like alcohol, cocaine, morphine, and what they thought was they didn't feel the symptoms no more, so they must be getting better. So, you know, they would throw a lot of those down. And medicine bottles are a common thing. When you get a chance today after the program, take a look. A lot of things we find is child's items, and it could be marbles, baby doll heads, baby doll parts. Marbles is a big thing we find. Jewelry, we find a lot of jewelry. You know, maybe a girlfriend breaks up with their boyfriend, just like today, and throws the ring down the privy. Most of the items are household items where, you know, they're kitchen items that, you know, they would just throw away. But they didn't throw a lot of things away. That's why a lot of times we could dig a privy and not find nothing, because you reused everything. Another reason why a lot of privies are empty is because they had what was called a honey dipper. What is a honey dipper? A honey dipper is a group of guys that you would pay to come around and clean your privy out. And they would bucket the stuff up. They would put it on a barge out here in the harbor, Baltimore Harbor, and they would take it out to Dundalk area or these coves, and they would just dump the barge. And there are water dumps where you can find years later, and that's one of the places where we find these bottles. But yeah, the collecting hobby is a great, great hobby. You meet lots of wonderful people, and they're really easy. They don't take up a lot of space. So if you decided to collect them, they're a great collecting, great thing to collect. They come in different colors, different shapes and sizes, and I had a few to display. So after today, any questions you have today after the program, just come up and ask me. Anybody got questions now, real quick? All right, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Again. So our next storyteller is just absolutely an eccentric, and we've come to be very fond of her. She's a retired railroad clerk and stenographer. She worked for 30 years with Amtrak, and since retiring has been an active community organizer and a publisher of the newsletter, the Inner Harbor Network. She's currently creating an archive of the work of the Baltimore City poets for the Baltimore City Historical Society. So if you're a poet, please see Rosalind after this. She writes and performs poetry in her spare times, and she also writes letters to the editors in her spare time, which is a fun hobby. So please welcome Rosalind Ellis Hyde.
Well, I collect bottles too, but they're a different kind. They're paper. And where I get them is when I go up to New York, and I'll tell you why I go up to New York. When you go into the department stores, you have a whole perfume area, and you can get perfume sprayed on you like crazy. And I would love to have perfume sprayed. I love to smell it. It's fantastic. But after a while, you get so much on you, you begin to smell like a landfill. So one day, I noticed that there were these sample cards, these perfume sample cards, and they're quite lovely. I mean, I love graphic art. And so I started looking at them, and I think I gave you all samples of what they look like. And I asked the woman at the counter, I said, well, do you have any idea who designs these? And she said, well, actually, no, I've never actually looked at them before. And I said, well, they're quite lovely. They're really nice. So I was offered a chance. I went to school in New York, and I was offered a chance to be the representative for my class at the school, and I'm not going to tell you what class it was. And so I go up to New York on a fairly regular basis. And so fortunately, I can make what I call my perfume card safari. I take Amtrak up, I get off the train at Penn Station, and then I walk over to Macy's. And I walk into the perfume counters. And one thing about the stores, I don't know who these people are that sell perfume, but they are so aggressive. Believe me, I have never seen anything like it. They will spray you to death. And finally I said, oh, I have asthma. No, please don't. And could I have the perfume card? Oh, I'll spray it for you. No. Don't spray it. You don't want it sprayed? No, I collect them. You collect them? I said, yes, they're beautiful. Look at them. And she said, yes, they are quite nice. So I would go around to the different counters and pick up the cards, but you had to be so careful that they don't spray them. And the reason why you don't want them sprayed is when you put them in a book like this, if they've been sprayed, they'll get slightly discolored over time, and you don't want that. So I would go through Macy's and pick up the cards, sometimes 5 if I like the design, put them in my bag, and then I'd go up farther on Fifth Avenue to Lord & Taylor's. And they have a very nice perfume area, and I did the same thing. Now, they're not quite as aggressive as they are at Macy's. So then on from Lord & Taylor's at 39th and 5th up to Saks Fifth Avenue at 49th and 5th, and they become more aggressive as you move north. And I would go in and, this is a lovely new scent, oh yes, thank you so much. I'm here really, may I have that perfume card? Oh, I'll spray it for, no, don't, please don't. Why don't you want it sprayed? And I said, well, I collect them. And they said, but don't you want the smell? I said, no, because the smell, the perfume, will disintegrate the card after a while. So I go through and I pick up the cards at Saks Fifth Avenue. And then my next stop, my school is at 75th. So my next stop is Bloomingdale's and Lexington Avenue. And if you want to know aggressive salespeople, go to the perfume counters and the cosmetic counters of Bloomingdale's. They will do your makeup for free. They will give you more perfume samples than you can believe. But again, I'm just here for the perfume cards. So I'd collect the perfume cards. Oh, you don't want them sprayed? And then finally, they just, oh, sweetie, you look so beautiful. Oh, we really can maybe do your face. Oh, your eyebrows. Oh, we could really do your, no, I'm just perfume cards. So finally what I said is I'm a comparison shopper. And they left me alone after that. And since I go up to New York about 3 times a year, I do this, regularly. And one thing you notice when you start collecting perfume cards is the number of perfumes that you don't see them anymore. And I said, well, what happened to Jennifer Lopez, whatever she was doing that year? I think she comes out with a new scent of perfume every year when she's not doing everything else. And they said, well, they discontinued them. It didn't sell that well. And I said, well, what about the bottles? The bottles are so pretty. And what I found out that shocked me is all these wonderfully designed perfume bottles. There is a contract that the stores sign that when the samples are finished, they have to crush them and they go to, recycling. So that's pretty much how I do it. And what I really like are the cutout cards. Can you all see this? I mean, I know this is not really the venue for such a display, but they're wonderful, wonderful cutouts. And with lasers, you see, they can do that. And here's a sample perfume card for something called Oh My Dog. And that is a veterinarian-approved perfume for your dog. I tell you, they'll sell perfume for anything. And then sometimes you have these marvelous shapes that are cut out in the middle. And as I said, I love graphic arts. I just adore things. Look at the shapes. And then you get into the different colors. Okay. So you have different colors. I would love to talk to anyone if you're interested in this afterwards. I have a sample bag if you didn't get one of the samples in the beginning. And believe me, there's so much junk out there. My husband calls it all junk. But there's so much junk out there that's really beautiful. And you have to learn to look for it. And after a while, you start collecting it, and then you start putting it together, and you say, no, I didn't do that. And you start saying, hey, they're really beautiful. And what's so amazing is that probably 50 years from now, this will be the only collection of perfume cards from the 2000s. Anyway, thank you so much.
Our next storyteller works at one of the best establishments in Baltimore, the Children's Bookstore on Deep Dean Road. If you're not familiar with it, it's a great place to go with kids or just to go to kind of recapture your childhood. They have beautiful books. And Emma has just finished writing her first novel in spite of running her craft business, Creative Procrastinations, and working at the Children's Bookstore. She has 4,500 books, a large collection of Harry Potter memorabilia, 5 cats, and every letter and note anyone has written to her since 1993. She also has a very fetching fashion sense, so we're honored to have Emma Cassell.
Clothes are one of my collections, too. I actually have enough to put a top and a bottom on about 150 to 200 people. They won't match, and they may not be seasonally appropriate, but there's top and a bottom for everybody. But I come from a family of collectors. Some people might call us hoarders. And we hate to throw away anything that might one day be useful. And I can tell you what, creative people can find a use for just about anything. Start with my uncle. He's probably the worst offender in the family. My family goes to West Virginia every summer, and he has a house up there. He also has a barn, a huge barn. Like, we're talking between the 2 floors and the sheds underneath of it, over 10,000 square feet, probably, full of stuff. He's never actually let me go in and wander around, but he spends all his time organizing it. He also has another building that is full of stuff, and then he has this weird space-age igloo house from the 80s that my aunt tried to build. That's full of stuff, too. But he decided that, having everybody stay in the house was, like, a little irritating, so he was going to build a guest house at the bottom of the hill. So he builds this guest house, lovely little house, like 4 bedrooms, and nobody has ever slept in this house because it is full of stuff. He has doors, windows, tile, linoleum, Christmas decorations that he got from like a hardware store that was closing, all types of stuff. He actually drives around on trash day and takes stuff out of people's trash because it is useful. So you ever need anything, go to my Uncle John. You got to pay for it. You can't have it for free. But he's probably got something to use. And then there's my dad. And when we were growing up, we used to go to these fantastic auction house in Virginia. All this lovely stuff from all these old houses. And every time we went, my parents would let us pick out something for them to bid on for us. And they usually got it. But my dad never got out of his auction habit. But it kind of degenerated a bit. So my dad mostly buys box lots. And for those of you who don't do auctions, there's like the inside part of the auction. That's where all the really nice stuff is. And it's all pretty much individual. The dishes, the really nice furniture. The not so nice furniture is outside, and so are the appliances. And then there are rows upon rows of cardboard boxes full of random stuff. And you got to get there really early so that you can dig through the boxes and figure out which boxes you want. But the problem is that the way the auctioneers do this is they start at box 1 and they go down to $1, and nobody wants it. So they add box 2. Nobody wants it. They add box 3. So you could end up with 8, 10 boxes full of stuff just to get the one thing out of the one box. And like I said, my family does not throw things away. Which means if my dad says to you, so are you looking for any dishes? The answer is no. Because if you say yes, he's going to give you a whole lot of dishes. Or handkerchiefs, or toy soldiers, or whatever is in the box that he's trying to find a home for. And then it comes to me. And I'm a crafter. I make lots of things. I use pretty much every media there is. So I keep a lot of it around, and I look for things not just at craft stores. So whenever I see something that looks like it might be interesting, I'll buy a bunch. And then it sits around until I have an idea for it. A couple of years ago, I bought little enamel bird cages. I had no idea what I was going to do with little miniature enamel bird cages, but I bought like 30 of them. And then last year, I was walking around, and I said, fairy nests. I make flower fairies, so I made fairy cages. It's probably my most successful product in my business, and now I can't find enamel bird cages anymore, so I kind of wish I'd bought 100 instead of 30. But I'm also a writer, and writers are collectors of words, of people, of experiences, conversations, a little bit of everything. And then I also like things. I have 2 Billy bookcases from IKEA that are literally full of knickknacks. And, there's this big clutter-free movement, simple living type thing. So I read a bunch of these books, and I was like, oh, it'd be so nice. My house would be clean. I wouldn't have to dust this crap. I wouldn't have to reorganize it because I got a new thing to put in there. So I decided I was going to try and go through all of it. I am really, really good at getting rid of my husband's things. I am not so good at getting rid of mine. And part of that is because each of those items has a whole set of memories and feelings that go with it. I can look at one of those items and I will remember the exact time when I bought it, who I was with, what I was doing, where I was in my life. And I don't like the idea of just getting rid of that. I know people say, oh, you just need a photograph or you can remember, but you can't remember. Think of all the crap we have to remember on a normal basis, doctor's appointments, pay the bills, and you lose all the special memories. So, like I said, we keep everything. So my attic is pretty full of stuff. And every once in a while, I'll get into a kick when I don't want to actually clean the downstairs part of my house. I'll decide that I need to reorganize my attic. And I find all types of interesting things that I didn't remember that I had in my attic. So last time I was up there, I found, I'm going to read you some of the things that I found. One of it was possible proof of termites nesting in the attic. There's this little dirt structure with little tunnels in it on top of one of my plastic boxes. I kept it because it looked kind of cool, but then it fell apart. There were 3 different incomplete wasp nests, which makes me a little nervous because I was really sure I heard buzzing from the closed-off part of my attic last year. So I'm kind of scared to go and see the completed wasp nests. But I found a novel that I wrote when I was in 10th grade. I read a few pages of it, and it actually wasn't that bad. On the other hand, I also found some poetry I wrote. I did not read that again because I knew how bad it was. But I haven't gotten to the point of throwing it away. I have, I said, I have every greeting card and note and letter that anybody has ever written me since 1993, when I realized that I wanted to keep those things. Let's see. Course notes and papers for every single college class I took. I found this hilarious, I don't know if any of you remember the Green Earth natural health food store. I worked there in 96. It's a miserable place to work. Hope none of you are associated with it. But my friend and I decided to write up a satirical list of rules of employment. It was hilarious. I was like, wow, I thought of this stuff. This is really funny. But it was really fun to find that. I found some cartoons I drew, a design sheet for all the Harry Potter stickers I made for the children's bookstore's 7th Harry Potter party, receipts for every book I've purchased. I found the calendar I was missing of the list of books I read in 2005. That was really annoying me. I found my mom's high school lit mag from Madeira boarding school and a book of poems that she wrote when she was a little girl. These I rescued after my grandmother died when she was trying to throw them away. Let's see, picture book I wrote, a newspaper article about the positive influence of martial arts on young people, with a picture of my sister, who used to be a really hardcore martial artist as a kid. I found a bag full of stuffed legs, which were part of a project of making a model of the luggage from Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. I found half a table leg, not like the bottom half or the top half, but the side, because one of my table legs fell off and I haven't fixed it. A throwing axe and a lot of stink bugs. And of all of that, the only things I'm throwing away are the stink bugs.
So our next storyteller is an art and antiques dealer. He also calls himself a free spirit. He's self-taught. He started in the antiques business very, very young, which I'll let him tell you. One tip I wanted to give you that he gave us is that we should buy Japanese studio ceramics, because he's saying they're going to go up in value. So you heard it here. All right, please welcome Fred Parks.
Thank you very much. That's true. You should buy Japanese studio ceramics. She just said, I'm Fred T. Parks, and I have definitely addicted to antiques. At a very early age, at age 12, 13, 14, prowling the shops in Fells Point, Essex, etc. And I did my very first show at age 16, and I did $8,000 in about 20 minutes. And really the story kind of ends there, but I will obviously continue. Shortly thereafter, at age 19, I opened my first store in Fells Point. Again, I was 19 years old. And my youth was spent in Baltimore City and St. Mary's County, where I had exposure to, in Baltimore, in the same field, digging bottles. In fact, I too have dug in this very spot. And in St. Mary's County, finding colonial and Indian artifacts, and just developed a passion for antiques. And it's been my livelihood ever since. I've never had a job in my life. Which I'm very proud of. And I've worked from the bottom of the barrel to the top of the heap. And when I say the bottom of the barrel, I'll give you one of those brief stories where we used to call it scrounging, where you would go into abandoned buildings. In this particular occasion, it was about 98 degrees outside, and inside of this building, after I peeled the plywood off, of course, and managed to climb in, it was about 110 degrees inside of this building, filled with incredible material. The longer I'm in the building, the hotter it's getting, the itchier I am, and then all of a sudden I realize, as if you had taken the lid off of a pepper shaker and dumped it on me, I am covered with thousands of fleas. So I did what anybody else might do. I went outside and I realized I can't get in my van like this. So I stripped down naked and picked every single one of them off of me in the middle of the street in a not so pretty section of town. So that is the bottom of the barrel story. The other side of the spectrum is I've had the privilege of executing a bid for a very important client where I bid $160,000 on a Gustav Stickley corner cupboard. And this kind of dovetails with the next speaker because Barbra Streisand bought the cabinet that I underbid. Another bottom of the barrel thing, there's a place called Crumpton, which in the business we also call Dumpton, because you can virtually take anything there from pots and pans, and I've seen $5 things and I've seen $20,000 things there. But I've been there so many times, I know the spiel before the auction begins, and it goes something like this, and again, I know it verbatim. Right this way, sale starts right here. It's all chipped, it's all broke, it's all cracked, that's why it's here. Don't pass it back up to me and tell me it's broke. I'm only going to sell it once. You guys buying the gold and diamonds, it's all brass and glass to me. Know what you're buying. I said too much, let's sell some junk. 10, 15, now 20 and 25, but you go 30, and on the sale goes faster than can be. And again, it's a place where you can buy $5 things and $10,000 things, depending on what's there. I wish I had a common thread to pull the bottom of the barrel to the top for you, but I don't. Unfortunately, in 7 minutes, I have hundreds, if not 1,000 stories to recount. But, I feel I skipped college because of my passion and, quite honestly, the lucrative nature of the antiques business at the time. And I wouldn't trade all the education in the world for the amazing experiences that I have had in my livelihood that I love. And I'm glad to have an opportunity to share it with you all. The bottom to the top stories just go on and on. And one of the things I hope to leave with everyone here today is that everyone should collect something. And that doesn't mean you have to be very focused and collect just these. At this, perception is reality. And what I mean by that is, like, when you go into a museum and you see that little humble object in the case with that beautiful little tag describing exactly what it is, bear in mind that that little object may be worth lots of money. But the flip side is that lots of humble things are in museums and they are attainable. I.e., I was in a museum in Chicago, and there was a group of kids being led by a teacher, and they were elaborating on how valuable this little piece of Tiffany glass must be. And I, with my big mouth, I couldn't help but interject and say, well, actually, that's not entirely true. Again, perception is reality. So that you think of the word Tiffany and you think expensive, and you think of the word antiques and people think expensive. And unfortunately in antiques too, the word means furniture to a lot of people. That's not, it is a huge spectrum of material, whether that's metalwork, craftsmanship, jewelry, pottery, glass, paintings, Chinese material, American, etc., etc. That piece of Tiffany glass that I'm speaking of, I buy and sell these things on a regular basis. It's $200. So just remember that those things that you think that you cannot afford, you probably can. Just go out there and get some. It's really, and particularly right now in the market, it is buying paradise. Those things that I used to routinely buy and sell, they were my bread and butter items that were $200, $300, $1,000. Some of those things, because of lack of interest, and a lot of the collectors have them, that the numbers have reduced to the point where that $500 thing might be $40 now. So again, just remember that If there's something that you think, gee, I'd wish I could have one of those, go get it. It's out there. Personally, I currently collect and also buy and sell. I'm a dealer of 20th century decorative arts, and I buy and sell primarily ceramics and glass. My period is the aesthetic movement, Art Nouveau, and arts and crafts. And the American material is amazing. The Austrians, especially, the secessionists, had a way of expressing form through simplicity and geometry, and it's amazing how wonderful such designers can make a cube, how they can just juxtaposition it next to another box and make it wonderful. So I love ceramics and glass, and I just really hope that everyone out there collects something.
And our final storyteller for this afternoon is Scott Shrake, who comes to us from DC. He runs a storytelling series down there called the Story League, which is terrific. If you're ever in DC, check it out. Scott told a story at one of our Stoop shows before, and he's a great storytelling colleague and is going to provide a great finish to the show with a story about one of his many obsessions with women. So.
For the last 20 or 25 years, every year at holiday time, my dad asks me the same question. Hey, Scott, what do you want us to do with your Barbra Streisand stuff here? Can we get rid of it? Like a lot of you, my hobby between the ages of 10 and 14 was collecting Barbra Streisand memorabilia. Because the theme here was collecting, but I also did some Barbra Streisand crafts. This is one, which I'm going to pass around. Yeah, that was my hobby. Oh, that's not original now. It's a replica. Touch it. Barbara would want you to. So how it started was my parents' fault, because they had the Barbra Streisand album in the house, low to the ground where I could get at it. And I couldn't help noticing that Barbara bore a striking resemblance to my mom, or vice versa. And like all American prepubescent boys, I wanted to be my mom. So I started collecting her albums. I would mow lawns, I would rake leaves, I would shovel snow, do other odd jobs to get the bucks for my Streisand stuff, you know. Albums, 8x10 glossy photos, movie posters, you know, I would rent a VCR. Is that what they were called? VCR and VHS tapes over movies. And oh, the movies, right? So at school, it was like a 4-year obsession. At school, I would learn the state capitals, and at home, I would memorize Barbra Streisand movies and albums in chronological order, which I could still recite for you. Yeah. So I went through phases, different Barbra Streisand phases, like a lot of American boys. It's so normal, it's almost depressing. You know what I mean? I went through my What's Up Doc phase, where I wanted to have long honey blonde hair and a floppy hat and pursue a man not unlike Ryan O'Neal around the streets of San Francisco with Madeline Kahn as my romantic rival. I went through my The Way We Were phase. You know, I put on a beautiful spring day, I would put on the big headphones in the basement in front of the entertainment center that my dad had built for the stereo, and I would sit on the floor and sing along with Barbara. Memories, sing along. Like the corners of my mind. My dad loved it. He just loved it. I joined, of course, the fan clubs. Simply Streisand, Barbara Buddies, those kinds of things. Of course, the people that ran them were my parents' age or older, but the people that ran them, unlike my parents, had names like Bruce and Lance, and they lived in New York and San Francisco. And my parents were thrilled that I was corresponding with them, of course. So you might wonder, what did his parents think, you know? Because I've been thinking lately, why did I stop? Why did I stop collecting Barbra Streisand memorabilia? It only went on for 4 years. Well, I think my dad probably didn't like it that much, because my dad, I love my dad, but he's anti-clutter. He's practically hoardophobic, you know. He can't stand, so all of the boxes are still in their house. That's why he asks me every year, what are we going to do about it? But no, I mean, seriously, they probably think, or they thought at the time, 20 years ago, well, Scotty is in love with a woman. It's a middle-aged woman he doesn't know, and she lives in Hollywood, but it's a woman. Scotty's in love with a woman, yes. Then finally, when I was about 13, I went through my Yentl phase for a whole year. Whoa is right. I remember seeing the previews and thinking, this is my new role for the year. I want to be a girl who is forced to dress as a boy in order to attend yeshiva school in what is now Poland. And I went to see the movie in the theater. Oh, that's a good movie, I thought, at that time. Have you seen it recently, Yentl? Papa, can you hear me? Yeah, my papa could hear me singing The Way We Were in the basement. Anyway, that was the first Barbra movie that I saw in the theater, and I loved it. They had great scenes. There was one scene I remember in particular where these young yeshiva boys were naked at the pond, jumping in the pond, and it was just beautifully photographed. It was just a great movie. Barbra directed it, produced it, wrote it, and starred in it. It was her chef d'oeuvre. But then there was this local columnist in the paper in Detroit, where I grew up, named Bob Talbert. And he was on a campaign against Barbra Streisand and Yentl. So I had to stick up for my idol and for the Barbra Streisand community at large. I had had enough. So I wrote this letter to him, which is dated February 19th, 1984. Dear Mr. Talbert, I am sick and tired of you bad-mouthing Barbra Streisand and her movie Yentl. She is the most talented woman in the world, and she is deserving of all our applause. But you seem to think that Yentl is just another minimal effort, and Ms. Streisand is taking unnecessary credit for it. For your information, Barbra is almost single-handedly responsible for Yentl's success. It is a triumph, a superb accomplishment. What have you ever done besides sit around writing your boring, opinionated column and eating, which is obvious in your photo? I suggest that until you do something great, you keep your mouth shut. Thank you, Scott Shrake, age 13. Now, when I found this letter recently, which my mom saved everything, right? Like, I collected Barbra Streisand because she looked like my mom, and my mom collected me because I looked like, I don't know, because I sound like Barbra Streisand? I don't know. She collected me because I'm the firstborn. And I found this letter, and all I could think was, my God, that's my dad's voice, really. He must have either put me up to it or taught me how to write a nasty letter or something. But it's great. It's like father, like son. It's all come full circle, and I'm quite proud of how I defended Barbra, you know? So, again, I'm wondering why I stopped it all. I think it's because... Well, I know that I took up some new hobbies. So I stopped collecting in 1984, and I started college in 1988, 4 years later. And it took Barbra Streisand. She went on a hiatus because she was annoyed at the reception for Yentl. So our hiati lined up. And I was remembering back, so I start college. I mean, I've got other things to do. My collection is safe in my parents' basement, a great reminder of this wonderful all-American hobby that their son had. And I started college, and just about that time, Barbra Streisand's next theatrical release after Yentl came out. It was called Nuts. Nuts was not worth waiting for. I went to see it in the theater. I think the reason I quit collecting is from shame. Shame about what happened to Barbra Streisand's career, okay? Nuts stunk. Thank you.